It all began with a phone call. Aisha had always been one of those people who ignored random numbers. If it wasn't in her contact list, she didn't answer. There was just something about strangers calling her that made her skin crawl. But that night, as she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, nursing a headache and scrolling through social media, her phone rang. The screen lit up, casting a cold glow across the room. The number was unknown, but it was 11:30 p.m., far too late for any random telemarketer or wrong number. Curious, and perhaps a bit unnerved, she let the call go to voicemail. Ding! Voicemail received. She stared at the phone for a few seconds. Something inside her, a feeling she couldn't quite describe, told her to listen to it right away. Maybe it was a gut instinct, or maybe it was the eerie silence of the apartment that made the voicemail seem heavier, more important. With a deep breath, she pressed play. At first, there was nothing but static, a faint, garbled noise that was difficult to make out. She turned up the volume, leaning closer to the phone, her fingers trembling slightly. Then, a voice broke through the distortion. Aisha, her name. The voice on the other end was soft, almost a whisper, and yet there was something unmistakably familiar about it. She frowned, trying to place it. Then, the voice spoke again. Aisha, don't go outside tomorrow. Don't leave the apartment. Her heart skipped a beat. The voice was clearer now, but the connection still buzzed with static. She strained to listen, goosebumps rising on her arms. Aisha, this is you. I'm you. You have to listen to me. Tomorrow is the day you die. The phone slipped from her hand, crashing onto the floor with a loud thud. She stared at it, her mind racing, trying to process what she had just heard. It was impossible. It didn't make any sense. How could this be real? The voice on the other end. It was her. It was her voice, but older, more tired, more frightened. No, she muttered to herself, shaking her head as if to dismiss the thought. This is a prank. Someone is messing with me. She picked up the phone again and replayed the voicemail. The same static, the same distorted whisper. Aisha, don't go outside tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day you die. She immediately deleted the message, her heart racing. Whoever was behind this, it wasn't funny. It wasn't amusing. And it sure as hell wasn't going to scare her. Shaking her head, she put the phone down and tried to push the unsettling message from her mind. But sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, Aisha woke up groggy and disoriented. The strange voicemail from the night before lingered in her thoughts. But she pushed it aside as best as she could. She had work to do, meetings to attend. The world didn't stop just because of some bizarre prank call. As she got dressed, she glanced outside her window. The sky was overcast, dark clouds looming overhead. It looked like a storm was coming. She grabbed her bag and keys and was about to head out the door when something stopped her. A fleeting memory of the voice on the phone warning her not to leave. She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob, her heart beating a little faster. It's just a prank, she told herself again, but a small part of her, the part that had been unsettled all night, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she should stay inside, just for today. What harm could it do? But then her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was her boss, asking if she was on her way to the office. With a sigh, she shook off the strange feeling and opened the door. The day passed uneventfully. Work was busy, and the strange voicemail from the night before gradually faded from Aisha's mind. By the time she got home, she was exhausted and ready to collapse onto the couch. She had just started to relax when her phone rang again. Her stomach dropped when she saw the same unknown number flash across the screen. For a second, she considered letting it go to voicemail again, but something inside her, perhaps curiosity, perhaps fear, made her answer. Hello, she said, her voice shaking slightly. There was silence on the other end, followed by a soft, familiar breath, and then the voice spoke again. Aisha, you didn't listen. Her blood ran cold. I told you not to leave the apartment today. Why didn't you listen? She gripped the phone tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. Who is this? Who are you? The voice on the other end let out a low, trembling sigh. I'm you, Aisha. I'm calling from your future. And you didn't listen. Her throat tightened. This is a joke, right? This isn't real. The voice was growing more frantic, more desperate. I didn't listen either. I thought it was a joke too. But now it's too late. I can't stop it from happening. Aisha felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She stumbled to the couch, sitting down as her legs trembled beneath her. What's going to happen? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The static seemed to grow louder, more oppressive, filling her head with an unbearable noise. And then, the voice spoke again, quieter this time, barely a whisper. "They're coming for you, Aisha. They're already here." Aisha's heart nearly stopped in her chest. She looked around her apartment, her eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. The room was silent, but something felt wrong. The air was thick, oppressive, and the light seemed to dim, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. "Who's coming?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The phone crackled with static, and the voice on the other end began to fade. I tried to stop it, but they're coming for you. And once they have you, you'll be next." The call ended with a sharp click, leaving Aisha sitting in silence, her mind racing with fear. She stared at her phone, her hands trembling. What the hell was happening? Was this some kind of elaborate prank, or was it something more sinister? Before she could gather her thoughts, there was a knock at the door. Aisha froze. It was a soft, almost hesitant knock, but in the silence of her apartment, it echoed like a gunshot. She stared at the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind raced, remembering the warning from the phone call. "They're already here." She stood up slowly, her legs shaky. Every instinct in her body screamed at her not to open the door. But her curiosity, or maybe her fear, pushed her forward. She walked toward the door, her hand reaching out slowly. Her breath was shaky, and her skin prickled with dread. When she was close enough, she looked through the peephole. There was no one there. A strange, suffocating silence filled the air. The knocking had stopped, but the eerie feeling in the room remained. She was about to step back when her phone buzzed again. It was another voicemail. Her heart thudded in her chest as she unlocked her phone and played the message. The same static-filled voice greeted her, but this time it was different. The voice was weaker, more strained. "Aisha, don't open the door. No matter what, don't let them in." Her blood ran cold. As the message ended, the knocking started again, louder this time, more insistent. Aisha stumbled backward, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know who was at the door, or if she should believe the warnings she had received. But as the knocking grew louder, more aggressive, her mind screamed one thing over and over. Asterisk, don't open the door. Asterisk. She took a deep breath, backing away from the door slowly. Her hands trembled as the knocks became bangs, shaking the door on its hinges. Whoever or whatever was outside was no longer asking to be let in. They were demanding it. Her phone buzzed once more. Another voicemail. She hesitated, her fingers shaking as she pressed play. This time, there was no static, no voice, only silence. And then, a whisper, so quiet it was almost imperceptible. "They're already inside." The banging stopped. Aisha turned around, her heart hammering in her chest. The shadows in the apartment seemed to stretch, crawling along the walls, darker than they should be. She felt a presence, cold and oppressive, filling the room with a suffocating sense of dread. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A figure, standing in the far corner of the room, watching her. It was tall, its form distorted and shadowy, barely visible in the dim light. But its eyes, those eyes were piercing, glowing with a faint and natural light. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was seeing. It was here. It had been waiting for her, watching her this entire time. Before she could scream, the figure moved swiftly, silently crossing the room in an instant. The last thing Aisha heard before the darkness swallowed her was the ringing of her phone. Another death call.